Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay.
Yes, thanks.
So, everybody, welcome. Just wanted to welcome everybody to another Castlemaine Commons show. This show is titled Building Neighbourhood Resilience. And we've got a number of great community people to talk to tonight. Just to let you know that Castlemaine Commons was formed by the Castlemaine Commons Collective early in the pandemic. A small group of local people formed the group in response to the rapidly changing situation with the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on our community. We aim to foster connections, make sense of what is happening, catalyse action and create our local future. So welcome. We would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Jara people, the Dja Dja Nation. We'd like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Moments of shock are volatile. We either lose ground, get fleeced by elites and pay the price for decades, or we win progressive victories that seemed impossible just a few weeks earlier. And this is no time to lose our nerve. So tonight, we are really building on the amazing actions that have taken place in our community to build our resilience. There's been a heap of resilience building, but lots and lots of conversations around, well, what is resilience? What is building resilience and what is a neighbourhood? So we're going to explore a number of those questions tonight. And we've got a bunch of people here that have all been thinking about this and doing this over the last, I don't know, year, 2 years, some of us up to 20. So I'd like to introduce our guests. The gorgeous Emma King from Castlemaine Commons and Friars Forest, and talking a little bit about Friars Town this evening. Welcome, Emma. I'd like to introduce Alison Witten, who is here representing her role in her work role, which is she's part of the City Resilience team at the City of Melbourne, undertaking a resilience project. So we're going to hear a little bit about that. Tim Reid from Campbell's Creek. Hello, Tim. We've also got Michael Johnson. Is it Yeats Street, Michael?
Yeah, Yates.
Yates Street.
Yeah, so it's spelt the same as the poet, but pronounced the same as the gardening seeds.
Right, great. Thank you very much. I've also got Gina Pendrick here from West End Resilience. Welcome. And Antoinette, what's your last name? Antoinette? Birkenbiel from the Tooten Bushlands Group. So welcome. Tonight we're going to ask 4 questions from people. So the first question is, what is resilience? Who would like to have a go first? Alison.
I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. It might be useful for me to provide a little bit of background on my work and the origins of our team, because it's really grounded in a global need for resilience thinking that was identified by the Rockefeller Foundation several years ago as they looked at these converging trends of globalization, urbanization, and climate change and the impact on cities. And they said, we need to do something to build capacity in resilience to be able to respond to these types of challenges. And so our team's work emerged out of that. Our team was formerly called, until recently, Resilient Melbourne, and part of this global Resilient Cities network, really thinking about how we can improve urban resilience. And so we talk about resilience as the capacity of individuals, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to adapt, survive, and thrive, no matter what kind of chronic stresses and acute shocks they might experience. And that interplay between the shocks and stresses is a really important component of what we look at, because we're in the middle of a pandemic. It began as a shock. It's feeling like a slow burning stress at this point, but it can become a really challenging situation when it compounds with other factors. So that's sort of the overview of how we talk about resilience. It's a more institutional sort of structure that I work within, but a lot of what we do is try and think about how this thinking is important at all levels down to the community level. So very much relates to the ideas that lots of the community groups have been focused on as well.
Thanks, Alison. Anybody else got a different take on resilience? Michael.
I think with us as reasonably newcomers to the community, to Mount Alexander Shire and Castlemaine, resilience is the ability for us to be part of this community, but also the community to accept who we are. And that goes down to what Alison was saying about adapting and changing, that people move here because of what it is. And we want to be part of what it is, but we also bring our own thoughts and ways of doing some things that don't mean that Mount Alexander Shire or Castlemaine have to change to suit us, but we'd like to fit ourselves into it somehow, but not be bound by what already is. So I mean, that's a long way of saying we love being here, but we don't think it always has to stay exactly the same, but we also don't want it to change, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Resilience for us is being part of this community, but also seeing how we can help the community.
So it's very much, that notion of change is very much in that definition. I'm going to read out another definition similar to Alison's. So another definition is resilience is the capacity. So it's about capability and capacity of a system. So a system being individuals, organisations, networks of people, the way institutions function, to cope. It's about coping with change and continue to develop in a desired way. I think I preferred Alison's definition to that one. So it's about you talked about how we cope and change in face of shocks and stresses. Yeah. Tim? Pop your microphone on.
It does importantly include, resilience includes that capacity to transform when that's necessary. So in the context that we're in, where there's climate change and it's sort of locked in and things are going to change radically, it's partly about that capacity to be able to transform, to be able to adapt and, build resilience in the face of that as well. It's also very embedded within the ecosystem. So it's very much related to the well-being of the natural environment around us.
Thank you, Tim. Somebody else? Gina?
Hi. Yeah, I think Alison's description was absolutely spot on, but it's interesting within our group, which is called Western Resilience, that people say to me sometimes, should we change the name? We're not sure about the resilience part. And I think that resilience can be misunderstood, or the use of the word resilience can be misunderstood. I think it can be quite divisive. People don't necessarily want to be part of a group that's called Western Resilience. Maybe it feels that it's not what they're about. It might feel a bit prescriptive. And I think it's regardless of what your intention is, and perhaps Western Resilience, or the word resilience, very much describes what the group is about. In order to be very inclusive, I think you have to be mindful of language. And so if really what we want to do, especially initially, is to set up a group where everybody just feels very comfortable coming along, being a part of it. Words like neighbourhood, group can sometimes be a little less confronting than a word like resilience. So I think you have to also think about who you want to include, and we want to include as many people as we possibly can, and what language might feel exclusive too.
Yeah, great, thanks. Emma and I have had this conversation, and Emma, would you like to explore the alternative name that often people use, which is mutual aid?
Yeah, I mean, I just to comment on what's been said so far, and I think it sort of ties into that thing about how we describe what we're doing. Like, I really believe resilience is also about, as you're saying, Jen, about being totally inclusive, but also valuing the different things that people bring to a community, to a neighbourhood, to, and mutual aid was one of the terms that sort of sprung up at the beginning of the pandemic. It's like we all want to help each other, but I think people, also have issues with that, because aid has a sort of patronising and, we're here to help, and, so then the mutual ameliorates that a bit. So, I think there's, and I think, again, if we're going to be really resilient and diverse, we need to every group can call themselves something different, or like in Friarstown, nothing at all. We just Friarstown, you know, and we do stuff which you could call resilience building and networking, but it isn't actually anything formal at all. So I think there needs to be that sort of diversity and appropriateness for your own community and your own neighbourhood.
So we're starting to get into definitions of place, and that's going to be my next question. I just wanted to throw a few more things in there around definitions of resilience, just to kind of just to finish that yarn off. So resilience is being used to describe a number of different things, and health and wellbeing is kind of part of that space as well, and that's very much focused on the individual. So I went to a seminar about resilience and I learnt this. It's that there's kind of 5 types of resilience. Dinner. So individual psychological resilience, so your health psychologically and its resilience. Your personal resilience, so your capability and or access to resources. So that's your personal, slightly different to psychological. Then there's community resilience, so that's about our social capital, our social networks. The next one is social and environmental resilience. So it's where the community and the social elements are interacting very much along the lines of what Tim said. So this is the connection between people and place and our environment and what it's able to cope with us. And then the last one is disaster resilience, but I think I prefer Alison's term, which is those 4 types of resilience. How do they cope with stresses and or shocks? And stress is really, in talking about climate change, we're starting to talk more around the pace of change, the pace of an emergency, and emergencies like a fire or a flood are immediate. And most of our thinking around emergencies is in that immediate, call to arms, we all jump in, whereas this long, slow emergency, like the pandemic is becoming, is more similar to what climate change is going to be, that long, slow stress. So is it a disaster or is it a long, slow stress as well? Anything else? Oh, and then the other thing in resilience was, key to it is people, place and identity, which is what we started to talk about. And then there was the whole discussion about, are we bouncing back or are we bouncing forward, touching on what Tim was saying, so we can build back and be persistent in our current ways, go back to normal, or we can adapt and then we can transform to something new, so bounce forward. And that's a choice that we can make. So thanks for that. Anybody want to add anything about resilience before I get to the next question? Emma.
I think just the one thing in what we've been talking about that I feel we need to pay attention to is the resilience of the natural world that is separate to us. So being aware of those natural cycles and natural resilience within that is not about people at all. And I just think that's an important part of the conversation, and we can support that. We can create space and do the things that will help the natural environment to be resilient. But I think we need,
Antoinette, any comments?
Oh, I'm just taking it in. I was looking for a context there, thinking about how when we plan activities as a group to help the environment here, there's an awful lot of looking at other models, but also forward planning, because we know that climate change is going to come, but is already arriving. But we don't know how those things are going to manifest, because we currently have a world full of people who think, oh, it's just going to get hotter, instead of recognizing that there are going to be probably more frequent, less frequent, more severe weather events further apart at the moment. So this is the most recent kind of forecast. So when we're looking at strategies to improve an environment, like we've got an area where koalas come through, and when it was hot last year, Warrialda set up a koala watering areas around the town. And I thought, okay, well, we don't need it now, and we might not need it for another year or two if we're lucky. But we can look forward to when it's going to be really hot again, and they're going to need access to water, and we're going to look after them and the other arboreal animals, and see what we can do to help with the best plans that we have. But it is really, because all these things are so unknown at the moment, it's like a general planning. But I think that looseness is building in resilience, because we can move forward or back, or change our minds. But it's really important not to just head down one road head first, and just to see what happens. Feel it out, take your time.
It's interesting that you say that. We have a comment here from Keppel, and he's saying, I see resilience as embodying a kind of flexible strength which adapts and evolves, rather than a hard strength that resists change. There is a big psychological and practical difference between these. I really would like to move on to the next question. Quick, Alison, quick comment.
I'll try and be quick. I was just going to say something that we talk about in our practice is about the qualities of resilience. And one of those that we talk about quite often is flexibility, and that ability to kind of be agile and adjust your plans as you need to, because we don't know what's coming all the time. Another is being reflective. So to Emma's point around understanding sort of natural systems and their resilience, kind of learning from that and learning from past experience to inform decisions that we make too, I think is really valuable and important.
And that's very much what how Castlemaine Commons came about. It came about because we wanted to be able to have those reflective conversations and adapt really quickly to what was going on in the pandemic. Our second question is, what is a neighbourhood, a place, a locality, and what size works?
I'll start with the Friars Town, because I think for us it's quite easy, because it's a very defined location with houses and bush, a little bit, few people here and there in pockets, but that, I think for us, that actually that very place-based, Friars Town is, if you live in Friars Town, you're part of the Friars Town community. There's no dispute about where the boundary lies or how many people. It's just, and Friars Town has a population of around 200-ish, So I think
we've got,
Go on, Natalie. Yeah.
So we've got some places that have an identity, and they've got a long history, and it's really clear if you're in Friars Town. What about you, Michael? Yates Street. Why a street? Why that street?
It started off as a couple of houses had new tenants very quickly, and the newbies next door to us said, well, we'd like to meet people, so they organised a street party and invited everyone around the block, and we had a staggering number of people come. We had games for the kids and all of those sort of things, and people came after work and during work and stayed late into the night, and from that evolved a recognition that we'd like to stay connected in case there were calamities, catastrophes like the bushfires. So we set up a little Telegram social media app connecting points, and so it started as a social thing, but recognizing that there were opportunities for people to hook up if they had any problems. And we've used it a few times for, don't worry, when the ambulance came, so and so is okay. They just had a little dizzy spell and they came to check that, and don't worry. Or someone says, I'm not feeling well today, can someone go down and pick up my shopping, please? And So for us, it's very street focused. The kids around here all play together. It's quite a unique street because it's not just dead straight. So learned a little bit of the history of the street at the street party as to why those trees stayed so that the street wanders around them rather than the trees being pulled out and the street being a straight line. So we've got history here from the people who've been here a quarter of a century, and then there's the people who've been here 2 years. And all the kids playing. We're also fortunate in that our street is used by many people as part of their walking exercise route. So we have people from the couple of streets either side walk past and you'll be outside with huge nature strips. So all our streets putting in native plants, indigenous plants to offset, the yucky looking nature strips. So we're often out on the nature strip gardening and talking to people who are a couple of streets away. So we've got to know them and which bowling club they're at and what sort of dogs they have. So our neighbourhood has extended from a social perspective, but from the idea that we can help each other in times of stress. It's very much street focused because we can see each other from our windows and doorways.
Great, thank you, Michael. So anybody else like to talk about scale? Antoinette, what about your group? How big is your group at the Chewton Bushlands? Just pop your microphone on.
Sorry. Okay. There are 40 properties. We're all off-grid. A very early thing that was introduced was the fire tree. Although the community before that, because they were owner builders or self-building and without mains power, so the community were interacting a lot even before then. But once the fire tree came in, people had a map to see where everyone lived, and they had each other's telephone numbers. So they could call anyone who was appropriate to their need to ask them if they could help. So it wasn't just for the fire, it became a really important community tool. The area of the bushlands, which was the development, now has fringe dwellers of great importance to the community. So we're not that narrow thing, and we do recognise ourselves as part of an ecological vegetation zone, and we are trying to develop a bush corridor for the animals to travel through. We're trying to protect the environment. We're trying to make whatever changes are seen to be essential to be the least damaging to the environment possible, and to also do that forward thinking about how that will impact later. So yeah.
So I'm hearing
sorry. I think there are 52 people on the official fire tree that have their names and telephone numbers there to help or to be contacted. Yeah, sorry.
There's been a great conversation going on. Somebody said, but isn't Castlemaine, all of Castlemaine, a resilience group? So some people have been talking a lot about scale and about how big, and then Dunbar's theory came into play, which was on the advertisement for this show tonight, which is around, it's kind of like an analysis of the tribe and what size and scale can you have human relations that are meaningful. And that theory says, you have your main person, you have your key 5 people that you see on a daily basis, then you have your 15 who you invite to your birthday party dinner, and then there's, I think, 150. So they say between 150 and 400 is your kind of conceivable tribe. So Gina, what about West End Resilience, and how did you define the boundaries? Because West End Resilience is a group that's just started in the last 10 months or something?
Yeah, Yeah, so I wasn't there at the very beginning, and I can only talk about my own experience. But from what I understand, there was a group of people who were interested in starting more of a community neighbourhood group based around the West End Hall, which is here on the west side of Castlemaine. And I think there were a few, like the Thomas Street people had quite a good sort of social support network going on, and there was a few other things. They had a Christmas gathering in West End Hall last year and invited some extra people, put some flyers out, and so it kind of grew a little bit there. And then some other people had the idea about building a West End Resilience group around the hall, so people who live proximate to the hall, and they put together some gorgeous flyers and popped them in letterboxes around the hall area. I received one of those and went along, and there were about 70 people came to that first meeting. This was before COVID, this was in February, and we were really talking about bushfires and building our community with the kind of chronic stress of climate change and the potential threat of bushfires. And then COVID came, and we did another flyer drop just to really feel that if we'd started this group, it was a great idea now to continue these connections and support each other in ways that we could. And so we got our Facebook page, and it's interesting, Dunbar's theory, we've got 157 people on our Facebook page. So I don't know what that means. We have a WhatsApp group. We have a mobile phone that people can call if they don't want to connect via WhatsApp or Facebook. We also have an email group email. So we try to have lots of different ways to connect with people so that we're not excluded, but I appreciate that that's not all encompassing either.
So I'm hearing lots of different ways to communicate. Yeah. It's really interesting that you've all done lots of good thinking around how we're communicating, and you're doing it through multiple means.
Yeah, so the reason I'm sort of giving you that background is because the next time we did a flyer drop, just to connect people once COVID-19 became a real problem for our communities, we then kind of made more of a defined area. And it was about 440 households, I think, and essentially defined by Wattle Flat Creek, Campbell's Creek and Barker's Creeks. It's around that kind of west side. But again, we wouldn't exclude anybody who didn't live in the west side. I don't think.
Yeah. Tim?
I have a question as someone who's part of a very new group. It sounds like there's all those communication methods, and that makes me feel there's some wonder whether there's someone who's managing all that communication. Is there a group that is facilitating this and dealing with communication and things?
Yeah, at the beginning there was a sort of, after our first get together, and we can talk about this a bit later because I know we'll talk about other things later on, but there was a core of about 12 people who said we're happy to kind of take ownership or start moving with various things that we wanted to organise for the group. And so that group, then someone just said that they would have the mobile phone, and there was a sheet that went with that. And then when you had enough of the mobile phone, you just found somebody else who was happy to take it on. Somebody else moderates the Facebook page. I've got the email at the moment, so yeah, it's super cool to take turns.
Okay.
So for me, I'm trying to get what I've called the Inner North Castlemaine group up and running, and it's been a really interesting process in that it's hard to define the area and the space because it's not got the history of the Chewton Bushlands or the defined area of Friarstown. And I've been doing a lot of reflection on where to draw the boundaries. And then I've done lots of work in Aboriginal communities and lots of work around native title and defining boundaries of where people are claiming land. And again, I hear Aboriginal people talking about it's actually not about the edges, it's about the centre. And that's what is the defining thing that brings people together. And so that's really interesting. You talk about the West End Hall, the people around the West End Hall, but also Friarstown is another one. You've got, those key buildings and key things happening in Friarstown. I find that really interesting.
The nice thing about the hall too, Natalie, is that it's communal space. It's not someone's home. It doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to all of us. So yeah, it's lovely.
The other thing about Friarstown is we have the CFA, which has a really good network, and people want to be connected. So email and Facebook. There's various different organisations who are just run independently anyway. Yeah, I think that's.
So what if we said, well, what are the critical things that make the group hum, make the resilience building connect? So we're talking about place. We've talked about different forms of communications. What was that, Gina?
Cake tins, honestly.
Cake tins?
We had this hilarious thing happen yesterday. Somebody put out a call for a particular size cake tin, and you've never seen so many people respond. And now we've even got a spreadsheet with all the different cake tins that people in our community own, so that if you're ever looking for a 6-inch round cake tin, you know where to go to because it's in our Google Docs. Yeah, I know but we were talking about this earlier, and it's the fun things. We can't be serious about everything. It's actually what's connecting is a children's birthday cake or a bunt.
Yeah.
I think there's an element of, I was going to say, there's an element of sharing too. There's skill sharing, there's cake tin sharing. I know during the pandemic, a lot of messages have been going out around, hey, I have a basket of lemons on my front porch, go find me in Farnsworth Street. And I've enjoyed that as a way to give purpose to my walks. It tells me where people live, it orients me to the neighborhood. I'm relatively new, so it's given me a way to connect to people. So I think sort of having some of those small but purposeful elements built in is really valuable too, so that there's a reason for people to continue to engage. They can give and they can receive in really small but meaningful ways that are also very fun. So I've seen lots of pictures of stunning cakes that I could never make.
Other people, what are the essential elements? Antoinette?
Well, I was going to say I couldn't agree more, because it's not the neighbourhood as it is turns over. People come, people go, but there have been traditions here of the Christmas party, a bush bash, curry night in the middle of winter. So there's Christmas, then there's a curry night, and then there are just amazing people like Mark Carter, who with Kim, set up the film nights, which happened, whether the weather was hot or cold. But it's a beautiful bring a plate, catch up with everybody thing that is done with so much good feeling. And so it is really the down tools. Just come and be with people. And of course, we can't do this anymore because at the moment, because of COVID. So we've organised a whole lot of guided wildflower walks at the moment, so that people will get outside and get some exercise, be with people but not too close. So there's been a couple of weeks of that happening, which has been great fun. So
food is a great connector. Yeah. Food is a great connector.
Food and flowers. Antoinette, we were talking earlier before the show about inclusion. And can you maybe share that story again?
Which, about the neighbour, my neighbour who I didn't know before he got involved. He decided he would get involved with one of the projects we were working on.
And how long were you living next to him and didn't know him?
For 19 years, really. So, just across the road, really. Just saw each other from a distance. And but it's been really, really lovely to have him as part of the group, and it's been really, really interesting and lovely to see him develop confidence in it, and to know that he was in a safe space with people who weren't going to judge or criticise. And
what made it a safe space? Like, why did he all of a sudden join?
I'm very concerned about the road system that we have here not being properly maintained, because the off run has to go into the dams, And if they don't do the roads properly, the dams don't get sufficient water to overflow because they're designed to overflow. So this is a very steep area. When it rains, you know, the top dam is supposed to flow down, pick up all the rest of the off run. That's supposed to go into another dam. And the council did put in another culvert to keep that water going, which was fantastic years ago. But now the table drains are filling up with gravel, and all of that work that they did after the floods to create proper drainage has all been disturbed by the road grading not being done right. So now all those stones are actually scattered along the side of the road instead of doing their job of filtering the gravel. So, sorry, I've lost my thread.
How did he join the group?
His culvert was that big culvert, and that is the second dam down, and he's had almost no water for 2 years because of it. So he called the roads guy and contacted me and said, I know that you've been worried about the culverts and the water. And I said, yes, if they cleared out all the culverts, if the table drains were done properly, that would be fine. So yes, we bonded over water.
And so now he's coming to the group.
Absolutely.
That's great. So the key point, one of the key points there is that sometimes we form these groups and get involved with groups, and we find our people and we socialise and we love it, and it's really nourishing to hang out with our people. But I'm also hearing that this is probably a little bit counter to that, in that it's inclusive. It's everybody in the street is invited, no matter what social group they belong to.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely true. And we're very lucky. We've also got a closed Facebook group. We've got a website, and regular times when we know that we're going to see each other, which we look forward to. You know, you can be very isolated in an environment like this, and it's very important to keep in touch. And it's delicate. You know, it's very easy to offend people or veer off in another direction, but I think the mutual respect and delicacy and intelligence that people are applying to their communications is a thing of wonder to me.
So then, thank you. So the next question is, or we might have already covered this, but has anybody got any other comments they want to make in relation to what are the ways that each resilience group works? Anything else you feel you'd like to say, Emma?
Oh, one thing that was sort of following on from what Antoinette was saying, I feel like in Fryestown there's a lot of different activities that happen. So we've got the school, we've got the CFA, and then there's people who arrange working bees to clear the trees that are growing in the cricket oval, and somebody else is, you know, organising where we have Friday drinks, and then we have monthly lunches, and then we have quarterly gatherings of the solstice and Christmas and things. So there's like a real, I think that's one of the strengths of Fryestown. People select what it is that they're wanting to do. So people might come out for a working bee who you wouldn't see at the social events because that's not where they are. And I think that's having that diversity of activity and diversity of ways that people can be involved and connect with a community is something that's really important to, you know, making sure that everybody has some sort of network and can be part of what's going on locally.
Great, thanks.
I think, Emma, that works well too with shared responsibility, doesn't it? Because everybody's got something that they're interested in, and different people will take leadership or ownership of different things than what they're interested in, and that helps to kind of spread that responsibility too.
There's a quick comment. You go, Michael. There's a comment here I'll read out next.
Okay, I was just going to say, following on from the thread of trust and respecting people's differences is part of where our group works, because we started with one particular social app because people didn't want to be on WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever. They were worried about sharing data, and then you get worried about where this particular app might be mining data. So some people have gone off it, but it was the initial connection that helped us to know that even if they're not on that social app with us, then they're still there and they still are part of our community. The social app was just something that started us off. And part of that flexibility that Keppel mentioned in his comment is that we don't need the app. It was just a little thread at the start, and now we've moved on from that, and we've got other ways of connecting, oftentimes through the children playing together.
Yeah. Other comments on that?
I had a question just around, because often when working with groups in a more formal setting, you might sort of make an agreement about how you work together. Has anyone in any of the groups that have been established for a while, have they felt that there's a need for that sort of thing where you agree on how you're going to work together? In terms of respect, those things, or is it just very informal?
Gina?
We haven't got to that point. It hasn't seemed necessary. It might at some point, but I think because COVID-19 came along, we then kind of hunkered down. I think that it's possible of what will happen in the future, and if and when we're allowed to gather in larger groups and do what we kind of thought about doing initially. But
I suppose if it's needed, it might emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alison, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I wonder if this could relate to one of the questions that's come through around this sort of unique point in time where we're all really grounded in our local neighborhoods because we're stuck at home and not sort of connecting as closely with our extended social networks that exist outside of our neighborhoods. And so, I don't know, but I'd be curious to see whether some level of formality might be more useful the more we start to sort of stray from home and have other things that are, distractions in a good way from things that we're doing locally. So I'm just wondering about that. But I do think it is a really unique time that's allowed us, at least, in the West End, to kind of really grow a lot of those connections because we are just here a lot. And I think that's certainly something we talk about in our work in Melbourne is, how do we take advantage of this time to really build social connections and build the amenities and the places that people need to facilitate those types of social connections, the parks and
it's
the
ultimately,
hubs.
ultimately it's about, placemaking or belonging. And again, learning from our Aboriginal people around a connection to country and that sense of belonging and place is really critically important. And it's something that we are getting, I believe, very strongly from the pandemic is deeper connection to the places that we're in. So then the next couple of, just moving on quickly, question around what steps do you take to form or strengthen your group? Like what, I'm hearing one thing I heard about West End and briefly from the other groups is around leafleting, going around leafleting so that you can make sure that you've got to every house. Other thoughts on that? What steps do you take to form or strengthen your group?
I think one of the things is finding something that people are passionate about. So a reason for people to come together. And then the communications about that, I think you need to have that diversity that people have talked about. And I think leafleting means that you do get to everybody because not everybody's going to be on the electronic or other forms of communication. But for me, for my experience is that it's the issue, like Antoinette was talking about, the bush corridor and the koalas, whereas Fryestown, like the fire safety and then looking after our local historical assets is the thing that brings people together. So yeah, I think that's one of the things.
Keppel's saying here, I feel that shared ritual, resource sharing and celebration bring people together, even among people who are very different in beliefs and background. And Antoinette, listening to all those gatherings that you have in the Tooting Bushlands, it's just like, oh, I want to live there.
Your mic's off.
These are all things that have evolved completely with their own time and their own energy. There were filmmakers who were doing experimental films, and we got to see a whole lot of them first. So, you know, Mark set up a venue, and then, you know, as for communicating, there would be a flyer made, and people who aren't online will get news from someone else who is online. So there's usually somebody who can pick up for someone who's not able to do things on the computer, that they'll get that in a hard copy. So the whole network is such a kind of needs, not so much needs must, but people are rising to the occasion in the most natural way, and I you know, it makes you really feel, you know, more confident in the human spirit. It really does, and it's a slow process. It's not a. I'm not sure whether there is. I'm not sure that you can make these things happen, but I think noticing the point at which it can happen is probably really important. So, yeah.
Thank you, Antoinette. Being mindful of time, we're almost 20 past 8. We would like to finish at 8:30. So the final question I want to put to you, noting that comment, Antoinette, about slow and allowing things to happen. However, we are living in a pandemic and climate change is rapidly arriving. So given that we're all dabbling in resilience in our neighbourhood and our belonging in our place, what are your visions for the future? What future activities do you think your place and group and resilience building can lead to?
Oh, circumstances will probably, hopefully will be adaptable enough to the changing circumstances, and we can only hope for a peaceful transition.
Imagine that we are 10 years from now. What have we achieved in our place? Anybody else?
I know in Campbell's Creek that, and the group is only very small, but there is a move to start a community garden at the community centre, and there's already quite a vibrant food sharing community just within people there. So I imagine, you know, that's going to be something that will become quite strong in the area. It's already really emerging strongly.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Tim. Others?
Talk a lot with my partners at work, but I think it relates to a lot of what we do here around sharing, sort of the sharing economy in the purest sense, not the Ubers of the world, but the true sharing and bartering, and really thinking about what a local economy looks like and support for that in all different ways that can be really dynamic and resourceful, and contribute to ways that different people can bring the best that they have and share their strengths and everything. So
that sounds exciting, Alison. Somebody else? Michael?
So I've mentioned the children in our street quite a lot, and they are one of the reasons that people come together. 10 years ago, there weren't all those children in the streets, and 10 years hence, there probably won't be all those young children again. You know, it'll be turning into a teenage or aging population once again, and we'll probably have a few more houses developed in the street. So we'll probably have more people and newer people in the street. However, we do have a couple of people who are really good at planning for things like bushfire awareness and bushfire evacuation. So I can see that our group will take on board some of those plans as a community plan rather than it being individual households. And I can see how we've already started to share some of the food that we grow in our gardens. So there's potential also for a community garden to be going with our big nature strips and things like that. So I think there'll be a little bit of sustainability and self-resilience within our group, even though it's it's a street, it's not a town per se. But I can see that it'll just be those shared things that'll happen, and the kids who will turn into teenagers and then adults will be a big part of that.
Thank you, Michael. Gina?
Well, there's a few different projects that people in our group talk about and really want to pursue, and some of them are community gardens. So Tim, I hear what you're saying there about Campbell's Creek, and people really, when people talk about a community garden, they have this, just their faces light up. You know, there's an opportunity to gather, but also do something productive and really get your hands in the earth. And even though we've all got our own gardens and our own backyards, most of us, the fact of coming together and doing something like that, just having a reason to head down to the community garden and bump into someone, I think is a lovely thing. Renewable power as well is another conversation that we're having around having our own sort of small way of sharing our renewable power in our own community. The garden, there's a creek, Bottle Flat Creek, that is partly regenerated, but we'd love to keep going with that and do some plantings. And bushfire preparedness, Michael, I think the same name as a lot of people. Have talked to us about that. Craig Laxley, actually, we're really fortunate to have Craig Laxley come to talk to us about that one night too. So there's a few things, and again, it just gives everybody the opportunity to take leadership or ownership of particular things and everybody's interests. You can hook into to what you're interested in.
Emma?
Yeah, similar idea. Community garden is something that's come up in Fryestown as well. I think food security is going to be an increasing issue. There's also, I mean, it depends whether it's my, you know, like extravagant dreams or the practicalities of the people I'm working with. But I mean, there is conversations around we need to do better in working with agencies to manage the surrounding bushlands around Fryestown for fire resilience, but also for regeneration, because the bush is so damaged around here, as you all know, from, you know, the various mining and farming activities. So managing the bushland for both regeneration and fire resilience, but also possibly, you know, looking at biofuel power generation as well, if we're having to dispose of large amounts of vegetation through that process. And yeah, the idea of a community power for a community like Fryestown is quite feasible, I think, for the number of households. So, you know, independent power supply, so that we're more, you know, resilient in that department as well in disaster. I'll stop there for the moment, but yeah, there's lots of ideas, I think, and yeah.
I've got a couple. So in my vision, in my inner north, we have a beehive, which is an online platform owned by the people for the people, and we are doing lots of active sharing on that, and it's a sharing economy. And I've stopped work. I'm only working 3 days a week, and so most of my other 4 days a week I'm doing lots of sharing activity. Also in our resilience groups, we've developed some sort of, like, similar to what West End has done, and I think Treating Bushlands has done, in that there's designated people that are sort of on duty and ready to deal with a particular situation. And so that in those stresses or those shocks, these designated officers have been trained in first aid, have been trained in heat wave preparation, have got a watching eye. I think it was somebody was talking about, I think it was Vasco was talking about some tradition in Europe where they have each village, each community designates one person to be on watch. And they're, through the sharing economy, they are paid through the sharing economy to do that 24/7. And so they basically wander around and keep an eye on people. They keep an eye on the neighbourhood, they check out the koalas, they, you know, my neighbour has dementia and often wanders down the street, and me and all my family, our role is to keep an eye on him and bring him back. So that type of thing. So that we have, in these resilience groups, we have officers designated to be very active in our community. Anybody else got visions they haven't shared yet?
I've just got something else that I wanted to say, and it taps into what you said earlier, Antoinette, about being delicate. I think that, and Bryn, I see that in the comments, Bryn's asked about what people do when there's conflict, and fortunate for us, we haven't been around very long, but that doesn't seem to have reared its head in West End. But I think people do, you know, you just have to bring your heart to this. You really have to just understand that you come with care and you come with your heart, and that has to really inform everything that you do.
Thank you, Gina. Anybody else? Visions? At the candidates forum the other evening, I think it was the one at the, Michael, you were there clearly. It was a really interesting comment because there was the question, oh, that's right, it was the West End Resilience chat. And I was really struck by how almost everybody, no matter what political persuasion, talked about connection to place and resilience. I thought I was really impressed with that it was strongly sat across everybody. Did you get that feeling?
I did. I thought that it was a good indication, exactly as you said, Natalie, that it doesn't matter the political persuasion of people when it comes to sense of community and sense of place. The people who are living in this region are here for the region as much as for themselves. That they're wanting to engage with each other in different ways, of course, but and for different, possibly for different outcomes. But at the end of the day, people want to achieve something that makes sure this region can go forward sustainably.
Thank you. We are pretty much at time now. So final comments from each person. Tim? Just a reflection on maybe a key take home.
As a newly emerging group in Campbell's Creek, it's been really inspiring to see some of the really well-established groups and hear how rich those communities are and the amazing connections between the people, and you can really feel that there's something, that resilience in that terms feels something really vibrant and alive. So that's been really inspiring.
Thank you, Tim. Final word, Alison?
Yeah, something I've been thinking about sort of since I'm wearing two hats in this conversation is about the relationship between these sort of neighborhood and less formal groups to more institutional structures. And I think there's a real opportunity for both to work together because, you know, we as community resilience groups provide this, you know, channel into neighborhoods and an opportunity to collaborate with council and with more sort of structured organizations that have similar purposes. So I think that's a real opportunity for us to consider exploring, and I think about that on both sides. So I look forward to kind of continuing to see how that plays out.
Thank you, Alison. Michael?
Just quickly on Alison's point there about interacting with council, I think the beauty of these groups is that you can discover who has certain skills, and not everyone feels comfortable interacting with council staff or councillors. But inside a group, there may be one or two people who are very au fait with how to get through the legalese or the paperwork. So that, you know, if you can identify who those people are, then you can have much stronger spokespeople for your groups rather than feeling nervous that you have to be the one who has to do it all.
Final word from you, Antoinette?
This group have also been very happy to and looking to connect with other groups. So thank you for the invitation to be to have a look at what this group is doing and to be part of this conversation. And I think that networking thing is so critical. It's not just a structure, as you say. It's looking for those like-minded people who maybe you may be able to support, or they may be able to support you, but you know that you can make that connection.
Thank you, Emma.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what happens when we come out of lockdown, and I think people are saying like that point about people being at home a lot has sort of helped us to build these things. But I think there's a real sense as well of like, won't it be great when we can actually get together in person again and share food and have fun and have some music and, you know, have that social interaction. And I suppose wanting to raise that as important to think about as to how we can use that opportunity when people are really keen to connect with the people that they live alongside, you know, to deepen these connections and work out, well, what do we do next and how do we go forward from here?
Has everybody had a final comment? Gina?
Just very similar to what Alison was saying, mapping your networks, just understanding that everybody who's a member in your group, or if you can make your group as diverse as possible, understand who else they know and where else their interests lie. And someone will be a member of the footy club, someone else will be in the CWA, someone else will be in Rotary, someone else will be, and all of those networks work, you know, in their own way. And if you have a particular project that you really want to push forward or go ahead with, understanding the networks that your own community group have also helps you to understand how you might be able to use those other networks to go forward with what you want to do. Harness the power of other groups as well.
Great. Thank you, Gina. So I want to say thank you to all of you for participating tonight. And I understand that there's quite a lot happening on the YouTube chat, which is really great. There's a number of different neighbourhoods that have been talking about forming a resilience group or a mutual aid group, or whatever you'd like to call yourself. And we're really happy. We're really hoping that people will watch this show and get tips on how to put their group together. Also, Castlemaine Commons is putting our hands up to help people facilitate their first meeting if they would like. So just putting that out there. If you want to contact us, we're happy to do that for you. So again, thank you very much for coming tonight. And we're now going to play a little clip because we do love the clips on Castlemaine Commons. So thank you, everybody.
Natalie.
Thanks, Natalie. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and Natalie.
Bye.
Thank you.
And Zoe.
Stick around. Here we go.
Is the keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going on song. This is the keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going on song. This is the keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going on song. I am Abigail, and this is Sean, and we're so glad that you've turned this on and welcomed us into your home, and you are welcome into our home. We're in Dayton, Ohio. We're in Sean's parents' house.
My parents' house.
Sean's parents' house. We were in Louisville when the shit hit, and we packed our 3-year-old into a car. We drove kind of far. We drove here, and we've been so lucky and blessed to be safely here. And we thought we'd be here for like 10 days tops.
What did we know?
What did we know?
What did we know?
We thought we knew a lot. We thought we knew a lot.
Keep going, keep going,
Woo!
keep going on.
Keep going on song. This is a keep going, keep going, keep going on. Keep going on song. This is a keep going, keep going, keep going on. Keep going on song. And we've been mostly healthy. We've been okay. Are you okay? Are you all right? Are you okay? Are you all right? Are you okay? I hope your body is whole tonight. And if your heart is breaking, I hope it's breaking open open. And if your breath is shaking, I hope it's shaking through. And I hope that you've watched a lot of really great television, like a lot of it. And I hope that you find a hand lotion that actually makes your skin feel better. And I hope that you have enough to eat. I hope you're getting enough sleep, and I hope you have enough good company or enough good memory to last you a long time. Keep going.